What up, y'all? It's Joe Budden, here to talk about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to win real money while watching football. You can get up to 100 times your money.
Prize Picks will give you $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Just download the Prize Picks app and use code SPOTIFY. That's code SPOTIFY on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play a $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. So much of your personal info is out of your control, like your insurance provider that has your social security number and your favorite retailer that has your payment details. If they get breached, your information, your identity, is vulnerable. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Max Bankman, I'm the new doctor.
Welcome aboard the Odyssey.
ABC Thursdays.
This ship is heaven. We're tending to our passengers' dreams.
I'm in.
From 911 executive producer Ryan Murphy comes a splashy new drama on a luxury cruise ship with Joshua Jackson and Don Johnson.
It's your job to keep everyone alive.
She's in VFib. 1, 2, 3. Clear.
I have a pulse.
You're going to be okay.
Dr. Odyssey. Thursdays, 9/8 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
We want to warn you that this podcast contains disturbing content. Katie Callaway is in a soundproof storage unit set up like a sex dungeon outside of Reno, Nevada.
I thought I was dead.
She has been raped for 8 hours. And just when she thinks a police officer has come to rescue her, the man who raped her is allowed back into the dungeon with her.
He had such a faraway look in his eyes. I could just tell he was looking right through me. He was looking at me like I was a thing, you know?
But instead of threatening her, the man asks her to help him. He asks her not to tell the police what really happened, saying it would be embarrassing for her. But Katie now has only one thing on her mind: getting out of there and being free. So, half naked, she runs out to the police officer again and pleads, "Please, please help me."
He kidnapped me from South Lake Tahoe and everything, at which point the policeman calls for backup.
Slowly, the officer begins to realize that Katie is genuinely scared, that she is absolutely terrified. So he asks her to wait in the car, and when his colleague arrives, they go with the tall, dark, well-spoken man behind the curtains and see his pornographic dungeon, also filled with drugs and alcohol. They realize what Katie said is probably true.
So he was then arrested, you know?
They put handcuffs on the man and ask for his name. The man, who had been calm until now, becomes angry and says he won't answer any questions. But eventually, it comes out that his name is Philip Garrido. And this isn't his first run-in with the law. "I think I need to grow up," Philip Garrido tells the police that night. But for Katie, it's an unimaginable relief to be out of the dungeon, out of her nightmare. However, it turns out this is not the end of her nightmare. And it's not the end of Philip Garrido's criminal journey either. Far from it.
I just started screaming, "Oh my God, oh my God. That's him, that's the guy who kidnapped me."
You're listening to Girl Missing, a 6-part series about a terrifying kidnapper who repeatedly fools the system and is allowed to continue for years. I'm Jonathan Rollins, and if you like this series, don't forget to follow Crime by PodLit so you can see everything else we're working on and be notified when all new episodes are released. But now let's continue. This is Chapter 2, A Sick Man.
They were shocked when they walked into the storage. They found it was basically set up as a prison.
Yes, when the police officers began investigating Philip Garrido's soundproof dungeon, they were horrified. We hear from author John Glatt, who wrote the book, Lost and Found, about this case, describing what the police saw.
There were heavy blankets to shield, anyone coming in from seeing what was actually inside. And it was like a prison within a prison, which will be echoed later, by the way, obviously.
Yes, building a prison within a prison is something Philip Garrido would do again. And next time, he would be smarter. And now it turns out he had actually spent months building this sex dungeon.
Because that's his sexual fantasy, to have a sex slave and rape her.
But the fact that this was a dream for Philip Garrido, and that it would happen again, is something the police don't know or even suspect as they pushed back the thick blankets and carpets to reach the room inside, prepared for advanced sexual acts.
There were dildos or other sexual things like that inside. There was a whole stage with a bed on it and everything, and coloured flashing lights. So he'd gone to a lot of trouble to set up this kind of fantasy for himself.
And later, when the police searched the car, they found the handcuffs, the rope Philip Garrido used to bind Katie Callaway, and even the key to his padlock, which he had dropped in front of the passenger seat. Inside the storage unit, they found, in addition to large quantities of LSD and hashish, piles of pornographic magazines and books. They also found Katie Callaway's clothes, her pubic hair, and traces of semen on the floor. In short, the evidence was pretty clear. At first, Philip Garrido refused to be interrogated, but then changed his mind. And once in the interrogation room, he opened up. Very quickly, he enthusiastically began talking about his dream of becoming a rock star. He also revealed that he was married. But when the investigators started asking about the night of November 23rd, he became remorseful. He said that this was his only way to experience pleasure, that he hadn't meant to do what he did, and that he couldn't help himself. He even started crying. I held my arm around his shoulders, and he rested his head on my chest, the investigator later recalled. I wanted him to open up to me, but I think he was just playing a game, a role. He was intelligent.
He managed to manipulate the system right from early times. He managed to talk his way out of it. He was very smart, and he was very canny. And he had a way of kind of associating with people and getting them to, wrap them around his little finger. And that's what he was trying to do this time, but it didn't quite work.
No, this time he didn't manage to fool the system. The evidence was too overwhelming. And Katie Callaway was too strong and credible a victim and witness. So, Philip Garrido was charged. But there's something that makes this case special and a bit complicated. It's also something that will affect the outcome and create a mess many years later.
It was further complicated because it went across state lines. He kidnapped her in South Lake Tahoe, California, and drove her to Reno, Nevada. So that crossed two state lines, so that made it a federal case. But he was arrested and the actual rape happened in Reno, so that was a Nevada case for that, So there were two separate trials and things that happened with it. It was kind of complicated, I guess.
Yes, since the kidnapping took place across two states, both California and Nevada, it became a federal case. And that trial was held in California. But the rapes occurred in Nevada, so that crime fell under the state's legal system. And this would turn out to be very beneficial for Philip Garrido.
One side didn't know what the other side were doing, basically, And he, of course, Garrido managed to manipulate that to his full advantage.
Yes, we've now understood that Philip Garrido is a manipulative and smart person. When he kidnaps Katie Callaway in 1976, he is 25 years old. And as we mentioned, this isn't his first encounter with the justice system. But this was nothing his parents suspected when he was born on a chilly day in April 1951.
He grew up in Pittsburgh, California. His parents were just blue-collar working class.
In the early 1950s, Pittsburgh was a middle-class town in the countryside. I grew up in the countryside in a clean house, and I was the baby of the family, spoiled, Philip Garrido would later recount. He had an older brother, but they were never close and never really had a good relationship.
His father, Manuel, he said he was a very good kid.
Philip Garrido's father, Manuel, was strict and kept to the rules at home, while his mother, Pat, according to both Philip and Manuel, let him do pretty much whatever he wanted. She spoiled him, and in retrospect, Philip described his parents' behavior as having caused him considerable emotional conflict. But for the most part, there were no problems with Philip as a child. He was smart, funny, and polite, and he liked making people laugh. But then something happened during his teenage years.
He had a motorbike, and he had a big serious motorbike accident. Where he was in hospital with brain damage, and according to his father, he was never the same again, you know? He was kind of different, and that's when they think everything went wrong.
This episode is brought to you by Etsy.
Oh.
Hear that?
Okay. Thank you.
Etsy knows these aren't the sounds of holiday gifting. Well, not the ones you're hoping for. You want squeals of delight. Happy tears.
How did you?
And spontaneously written songs of joy.
I am so happy. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, the song needs a bit of work, but anyway, to get those reactions, make sure everyone on your list feels heard with handmade, handpicked, and designed gifts from small shops on Etsy. Gifts like personalized jewelry, custom artwork, cozy style items, vintage pieces, and home decor to celebrate all of your favorite people and their specific kind of special. For original gifts that say, I get you, Etsy has it.
This episode is brought to you by Peacock and the new original docuseries, Making Manson. In 1969, Charles Manson and his followers committed 7 brutal murders in Los Angeles that would make him infamous. Now, with access to over 100 hours of phone recordings between an incarcerated Manson and his closest confidant, a new story will unfold with shocking revelations from the man himself. Making Manson streams November 19th, only on Peacock.
Manuel Garrido, Philip Garrido's father, was interviewed by India Today in 2009, and he didn't hold back his words.
He's crazy. He's out of his head. He was on LSD, and he had a very serious motorcycle wreck and hit his head.
Yes, it's a bit hard to hear here, but Manuel Garrido says the motorcycle accident wrecked Philip's head, and after that, things began to change. The family had now moved to Brentwood, about 90 miles east of San Francisco, and Philip had started at Liberty High School. His father had high expectations for his intelligent son, who was also very handy. He could have become an engineer, and on top of that, he was very, very good looking.
He was like 6'4", he was very thin, he had long black hair, and everybody said he looked really handsome, you know, he looked really good.
But despite all the good prospects, Philip isn't very interested in school, and the motorcycle accident doesn't make things any better.
He got into drugs in a very big way. He was smoking marijuana, he was doing LSD, he was running wild, really, you know, and out of control.
But outside of his fascination with different types of drugs, Philip has another fascination. A fascination that is much, much worse.
He would later admit to doing, you know, having this kind of weird sexual fantasies. I mean, he would stop outside elementary and high schools in his car and masturbate, you know, with a curtain over the window to very young girls. And that kind of got him off, which is very, very sick.
At Liberty High School, he's also rumored to lure young girls to a shed in his parents' backyard, often by offering them drugs, and then he drugs and sexually exploits them. During high school, he also develops an increasing interest in music, and when he leaves school in 1969, his biggest dream is to become a rock star.
After he left school, he joined a rock band.
He moved to the small ski town of South Lake Tahoe. Together with the brothers Eddie and Steve Loeb, he starts a rock band that played music inspired by Philip's idols, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Pink Floyd, and Leonard Skinner.
And they would play around South Lake Tahoe, on a Saturday night at various clubs. And they were kind of well known. And at the height of their set, Philip had written a song called Insanity, and he would just go crazy when he performed it and get really, it went on for like 10 minutes, and the rest of the band were kind of bored while Philip went on and did his insanity things. And later, when they listened to the words, they thought it was kind of, they got scared what happened later, in fact.
But even though his bandmates thought the song Insanity was a bit strange, Eddie Loeb has also said in hindsight that he found Philip Garrido to be fun and enjoyable to hang out with during this period. However, he was more skeptical about Philip's wife, Chris. Yes, he actually had a wife. After high school, Philip married his high school sweetheart, Christine Murphy.
She was a croupier in a local casino, and everybody I spoke to that knew both of them said that she was like his puppet. She would do everything he wanted, and she was perfectly knew what was going on sexually with him and his strangeness, and she went along with it, and it was like accepted that he did that.
Yes, because during these years, Philip's fascination, or you could almost call it obsession, with sex only gets worse and worse. He often picks up young girls after the band's gigs and takes them home. He forces Chris to sleep in the garage or somewhere else so that he can freely have sex with others, preferably several at a time, in their bed. But apparently, the groupies he can pick up at the clubs aren't enough.
There was an instance where he kidnapped, I think it was a 12-year-old girl from outside of school and took her to a hotel, and then had sex with her. And the next morning, the parents found him, and he was arrested for that a few years before Katie. But the girl refused to go to court and testify against him because she was too scared that her character was going to get blemished.
This happens in 1972, and Philip is about to celebrate his 21st birthday. He and a friend have arranged to meet a girl in Antioch, and remember this place because it will play a crucial role in this story later. But we're not there yet. Instead, Philip and his buddy pick up this girl, and she has brought along a 14-year-old friend. They give the girls barbiturates, which was a popular drug then. It makes you calm and drowsy. Eventually, they check into a motel, and the 14-year-old girl passes out from all the drugs. She later recounts that she was raped over and over again all night, but so out of it from the drugs, she couldn't do anything about it. Her worried parents find her at the motel, in bed with Philip Garrido the next day. He is arrested and charged with statutory rape, but when the trial is about to start, the raped girl drops out and withdraws her complaint. It has later come to light that Philip Garrido's lawyer had threatened the 14-year-old girl, saying they would portray her as a whore if she testified against Garrido.
He said, you'll go down, nobody will believe you, and you're going to be considered a slut if you go through with this. And she got really scared and refused to cooperate with the police. So I think there was a record marked, but, he had no conviction or anything.
No, he got caught for drug possession and use a few times, but otherwise, Philip Garrido's criminal record was fairly clean when he was arrested in 1976, despite the incident with the 14-year-old girl back in 1972. But now, that was about to change because Katie Callaway wasn't going to be silenced in the trial that started in March of 1977.
Katie Callaway, gave very, very dramatic testimony.
During the interrogation, Katie gave a detailed account of what happened on the evening of November 22nd. She described the abduction, how he tied her up and handcuffed her. She spoke about the horrifying sex dungeon, and despite protests from Philip Garrido's lawyer, she described the rape in detail. But she was also honest about not protesting, not resisting. I was completely passive, she said. I was trying to handle the whole situation. I have a 7-year-old son, and that makes you think twice. She explained how she didn't want the terror to take over, and if she just obeyed, maybe he would let her go, and maybe not kill her.
She was very, very moving about what happened to her. She was very, very articulate, and she actually stood there in the witness box and confronted him, for what he did to her at the trial, which was very dramatic. And of course, she would never be the same again. It was a life-altering experience for the poor girl.
When it was time for Philip Garrido to testify, he's allowed to explain in detail about his sexual habits, or unusual habits, to his lawyer. He describes how he would sit outside schools and masturbate with towels covering the car windows so no one could see. He is asked if he has masturbated in other public places, and he answers yes, in restaurants, toilets, bathrooms, bars, and other entertainment establishments, and in residential areas while looking through windows at women. But then Garrido changes his tune and says that now he is different.
He was very persuasive. He said, look, I'm terrible, I have schizophrenia, and this is all down to drugs. I was heavily involved in LSD and other drugs, but before trial he conveniently found God too. And he had his Bible, and he was reading the Bible, and he said, now I found God, I've seen the way through, and I've cleaned up my life, and I have to serve my sentence, but I'm not going to be a danger because I know I'm being cured of schizophrenia. And supposedly he thought he was going to, manipulate everyone there, but it didn't quite.
Yes, just like so many times before, Philip Garrido believes that his charming and convincing manner will make the jury think that now that he has found God, quit drugs, and become a new person, he doesn't need to be punished, or at least should receive a mild sentence. Here, we must also add that, as you remember, there are 2 trials, a federal one in California and a state-level one in Nevada. And
the verdict was guilty in both sides.
Yes, Philip Garrido is convicted in both trials, and he's sentenced to prison.
The federal case, he was sentenced to 50 years imprisonment in federal prisons, and then in the Nevada case, he was sentenced to a lifetime there.
Yes, 50 years plus life, but with the possibility of parole after 33 years. That is, in 2010. For Katie Callaway, it's a relief. The man who hurt her so deeply will not get out and be able to harm her or anyone else again, at least not for many, many years. But it will turn out that Philip Garrido's manipulative ability continues to seduce people, even within the correctional system. And Katie Callaway will encounter Philip Garrido much earlier than she could have ever imagined in her worst nightmares. For Philip Garrido will kidnap and rape again. A couple of years later, while Philip Garrido is serving his prison sentence in Leavenworth Prison in Kansas, far from California, a young graphic designer named Jaycee Dugard goes on summer vacation to Lake Havasu in Arizona.
A literal oasis in the desert, Lake Havasu City is a wonderful place to vacation. Blessed with over 300 days of sunshine a year, it lies on the eastern shore of the large reservoir of the same name, between the searing Mojave and Sonoran deserts.
Our tranquil waters and 300 days of sunshine are known to encourage uncontrolled relaxation, lots of laughter, and tons of fun. From the lake, to the beach, to the land, discover Lake Havasu City and play like you mean it.
At the hotel, Terry meets a handsome and charming Vietnam veteran named Kenneth Slayton. They spend a few romantic and quite passionate weeks together in the beautiful nature around Lake Havasu.
When in town, no visit can ever be complete without taking to the lake's almost endless waters and exploring all its hidden coves and beaches. Thanks to its calm surface, stunning surroundings, and year-round warm weather, it is widely lauded as one of the best boating lakes in the States.
But the vacation ends, as vacations tend to do, and Terry returns home to Los Angeles where she lives.
It was just a brief love affair, at a holiday vacation. And they never spoke again. And she went back to her house and found she was pregnant. She never told Kenneth, but she had a little baby girl. She named Jaycee the next year.
Yes, in May of 1980, a healthy little girl is born, whom Terry names Jaycee Lee. And you should remember that name, because soon she will play a crucial role in this story, and unfortunately, not in a good way. But of course, no one knows this in May of 1980. Terry raises her daughter alone and never tells Kenneth Slayton that he's the father of little Jaycee Lee, but he will find out in the most dramatic way imaginable. And while Terry struggles to raise her daughter alone, though with good support from her sister Tina, who works as a teacher, she's blissfully unaware of a certain Philip Garrido, who is serving a sentence for kidnapping and rape in Leavenworth. Philip Garrido, on the other hand, has his plan clear. He's going to get out of prison long before 2010.
And at one point, he has a cellmate, and his cellmate's niece comes to visit, a lady called Nancy Boccon-Grieger, and Philip works his magic on her, and they start writing to each other. She starts coming to visit him, and pretty soon they get married while he's incarcerated.
Christine Murphy, who you might remember, was Philip Garrido's former wife. She divorced him as soon as he ended up in prison, actually. And now, Philip Garrido meets the beautiful but quiet and shy 25-year-old Nancy Bocanegra, whose uncle shares a cell with Philip. And Nancy will also play a major role in this story going forward.
Well, Nancy is a big mystery, an enigma. Nobody ever really knew Nancy. She was very, very quiet and withdrawn. She seemed to, get on with people, but she didn't say very much to anyone. But she seemed to always be in Philip's shadow, even when he was serving his time. She was there for him. She soon moved to be within driving distance of Leavenworth so she could visit him frequently. And, she would do his bidding, I guess, bring him things in.
From the outside, Nancy seems to be completely smitten with Philip Garrido. Just over 30, he's still a handsome man. But Nancy is deeply religious and a practicing Jehovah's Witness, so there's also another thing that draws her to Philip Garrido.
I mean, he had his Bible with him at all times, and he would be reading it.
Yes, Philip Garrido now claims that he has found God. He has quit drugs and his sexual fantasies about young girls. And this is what he says to the psychologist he meets in prison. And this is what he says to Nancy, at least in the beginning.
To have a stable marriage in terms of coming up for parole, was a big plus, for him to get out. So I guess he was trying to set up this nice marital situation for when he got out, and how he'd found God, and he turned his back on drugs, which had corrupted him, and he was a totally new man. And that was the kind of line he was pulling at all these parole hearings over the years, you know.
And there's one more thing, besides God and a wife, that's important to show to the police and prison guards who will decide if he can be released earlier from prison.
He was very, very close with his mother, who would also visit him, you know. He wasn't close to his father at all, but the mother and son had a very good relationship.
Philip Garrido's parents have separated, but his mother has remarried a man named Franzen, and they have bought a house together in Antioch, California. When Philip is moved to a prison in Santa Barbara, California in 1986, Nancy moves with him and simply moves in with her mother-in-law in Antioch.
This is the house that she's telling Philip that when he gets out of jail, he and Nancy, now they're married, can come and live with them in Antioch.
As a convicted sex offender, it can be difficult to find somewhere to live. But now Philip Garrido can show that he has a wife and mother who love him and a house he can live in. And despite the fact that he shouldn't be granted parole until 2010, he has already had 4 meetings with parole officers to discuss a possible parole. No one has granted release yet, but it will turn out that it's only a matter of time, and a very short matter of time. In the next episode,
he managed to manipulate the system.
In 1988, Garrido is released from prison after only 11 years.
And suddenly they notice there's a dark olive-skinned woman and acting suspiciously around the booth.
And he doesn't rest on his laurels.
911? This is 911. On Pioneer Boulevard, the washout. My daughter was just kidnapped. Top of the hill.
They got on the bus and they started screaming, she was taken, and then we weren't allowed to get off the bus, and we just stopped there.
You've just listened to the second chapter of Girl Missing, about the kidnapping of Jaycee Lee Dugard, produced by Tove Freeman Leffler, and my name is Jonathan Rollins. Executive producers, sound designers, and mixers are Jens Nielsen and Thomas Rajnai. The clips in this episode came from Captive for 18 Years, ABC News, India Today, and GoLakeHavasu.com. This is a production of PodLit, and if you like this series, don't forget to follow Crime by PodLit so you can see everything else we've done and also get a notification when the next episode of Girl Missing is available. Thank you for listening.